Hello, everyone, and welcome to Decoding Westworld, an unofficial podcast about the HBO original series Westworld. I'm David Chen.
I'm Joanna Robinson.
And welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. What we do here on this podcast is we recap every episode of HBO's Westworld. This week, we'll be recapping Season 1, Episode 7, and I'm going to try to minimize the number of times I need to pronounce this during the course of this episode. Trompe.
Ooh.
Trompe. Yeah, that's what we'll be.
Great.
Yeah, thanks. That's what we'll be recapping today. You can find more episodes of this podcast at decodingwestworld.com. You can also email us at decodingwestworld@gmail.com. Before we begin today, I just want to ask the question to all of our listeners: are you doing okay? Because this week has been a pretty eventful week in the United States. We elected a new president, and whether you voted or not, whichever way you voted, there's a lot of people in the country that are pretty upset, pretty hurt, and are grappling with what to do right now. And a lot of those people are our listeners. And we know this because a lot of people tweeted at us, they emailed us, basically just saying that they were grateful to have Decoding Westworld to listen to during a pretty challenging week. Joanna, I think you experienced this as well, right?
Yeah, I was surprised, and I was also looking for comfort. So I was really happy that some people were just able to find it in us rambling about this HBO show. So
yeah, so if you were able to find some comfort in Decoding Westworld, thanks for listening, and we just hope you're doing okay, no matter which side you voted on and what your situation is. We hope you're doing okay, because based on the messages we got, there's a lot of people who aren't doing okay right now. Joanna, also, we got a lot of reviews in the iTunes store this week for Decoding Westworld as well, right?
yeah, we did. I put up on Twitter, like a couple of our 1-star reviews, most of which had my name in the headline. Like, some people out there in the world really don't like me, and that's fine. But I put out a request that if people like the show, to leave a review. People wrote us just so many nice reviews, and it was just really very lovely and thoughtful. So thank you all so much.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. If you like this podcast, it would be great if you could write a review, because I'm not sure if you know this, but there are approximately 750 million Westworld podcasts out there. Yeah. And the only way people know which one they should listen to is by reading the reviews or seeing how many star ratings they have. So any reviews you can leave us on any platform would be greatly appreciated. But yeah. Before we get to this week's episode of the show, we got to talk about some follow-up. There's a few things to follow up from previous week's episodes. And Chris Nichols writes in from Commerce, Texas. And he wrote in actually a couple emails this week that I want to discuss. But one of the emails he writes in reads as follows. Chris writes into decodingwestworld@gmail.com. It's nothing incredibly significant, but I wanted to point out that I was impressed by the showrunners' inclusion of a common video game trope, whether they did so intentionally or not, that they apparently used to heighten drama for the Man in Black scenes with Teddy in Episode 6. Escort missions. They are the most frustrating thing in games because while I'm incredibly adept at taking care of myself since I have honed my skills over time, escort missions require me to get a person from location A to location B without allowing them to be killed, despite their incredible ineptitude toward the world around them. The Man in Black is fantastic at taking care of himself, but he suddenly has to keep Teddy alive, and Teddy is, of course, not at all interested in allowing himself to be babysat, and this increases the drama for his scenes since his immortality in the game now comes with a vulnerability in survival being wrapped in that of another character's. As a gamer, I could feel for the Man in Black and his frustration. Something incredibly undramatic, staying alive in this gaming world that can't hurt you, becomes incredibly frustrating when you have to escort a foolhardy cowboy from location A to location B, knowing that, despite your own immortality, they will do any and everything they can to die and keep you from getting that damn story beat or achievement. In this case, however, it allows us to finally be worried for him, since if he can't keep Teddy alive, his purpose in the game dies and he loses the game he's trying to play. Anyway, that's enough of that. Love the podcast. That email comes in from Chris from Commerce, Texas, and Chris refers to this thing called escort missions or escort quests that is a common trope in video games. Have you ever heard of this? You ever played a game with an escort quest, Joanna?
I literally never in my life.
Well, if you've played many first-person shooter games, often require you to escort an NPC, a non-player character around.
Right.
That is to say, someone who's like an AI.
Yeah.
And it is one of the most frustrating things ever because most often their job is to be vulnerable and possibly get killed. That's the purpose of having the escort quest. And they're often not super smart in how they behave. And so they end up dying over and over again if you're only an average player such as myself. And it can be very frustrating to get them from point A to point B. And very clever that they inserted that video game mechanic into Westworld, which itself is kind of a commentary on video game design. So great email from Chris. And that was a cool call out that I didn't recognize. Speaking of things I didn't recognize, this email comes in from Trey from New Haven, Connecticut. Trey writes in to decodingwestworld@gmail.com. I wanted to point out an Easter egg in the show that I think a lot of people have missed. In episode 2, when Bernard and Ford are talking in Ford's office, the host playing the piano is playing a piece of music by Claude Debussy called a reverie, which, as we know, is the name of the code which allowed for hosts to draw on old memories from past builds. At first, I thought it was just a nice Easter egg connecting to the program Ford had created, but at the beginning of episode 7, the soundtrack during Bernard's dream sequence is also the piece, Reverie, except it's being played on the harp. If they hadn't revealed Bernard's status as a host in this episode, it would have been a great piece of evidence for the theory, but with the reveal, I think it makes a really subtle and clever Easter egg, which I really like. Anyway, you guys have a great show. I love listening to it. That email comes in from Trey from New Haven, Connecticut.
Yeah, and they kind of hit it because I think it was like episode 4 or 5 when the man in black is talking to Ford. Claire de Lune is playing on the piano, another Debussy piece. So they were just like, "Oh, it's fine. We like Claude Debussy. It's fine. Don't pay attention to Reverie too closely. It's not a hit that Bernard's a robot. It's fine. It's fine. It's great."
Well, thank you for all your emails. Thanks for pointing stuff out that we might have missed. We welcome them at decodingwestworld@gmail.com. And collectively, we read all of them, but it is an overwhelming level of emails. I think we got 80 to 90 emails in the last week, so it's just a lot of stuff to go through. We can't always get to them, but we appreciate everyone writing in. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention. Someone wrote in, they have a site called westworlddata.com or westworlddata.com, depending on how you want to pronounce it, which has data visualizations for a lot of the scenes from Westworld. And Joanna, you checked this site out, right? And you found some interesting statistics at westworlddata.com, right?
Yeah, I was actually really interested to find out that the top 3 characters with the most lines in the show are actually men, not the women. Like, I think of this as a very like sort of female forward show, but it's Ford, Bernard, and Man in Black thus far, 7 episodes in. It's Ford number 1, like we know that Anthony Hopkins drones on and on. Bernard, and then Man in Black, and then Teresa's like the character with the 4th most lines so far in the season. Dolores and Maeve and the rest are way down there. So, like, Ford has double what Elsie has, like, and she's this anyway. It's interesting and it's fun. I like charts and graphs, so if you like sort of visualization of data, it's a really fun site. So I was just poking around.
Yeah, cool site. Thanks for those who sent that in. westworlddata.com. I think that's all the follow-up we have, Joanna. So why don't we dive into this week's episode, Season 1, Episode 7, Trompe. Of course, you can always write to us at decodingwestworld@gmail.com. You can also get episodes of this podcast at decodingwestworld.com. Joanna Robinson, this week we saw a person who'd been advocating a crazy crackpot theory for months get entirely vindicated to the shame of people who thought this person was absolutely insane. But enough about Michael Moore and the election, Joanna Robinson. Let's get to the episode and your theories, which have been proven completely correct.
As I told Dave earlier today, a broken clock, Joanna Robinson, and Michael Moore can all be right 2 times a day.
Yes.
Like, don't consider us like your new prophets of whatever.
Yeah. So Michael Moore, for those who don't know, correctly called the results of the election months ago, and now everyone is looking to him to guide us. What happens next? The oracular Michael Moore, please help us.
Please be the next Nate Silver, since Nate Silver is now so thoroughly disgraced. Poor Nate.
I don't actually think Nate Silver is that disgraced. I mean, he gave percentage chances, but yes.
I think some people think he is. I am not. all I will tell you is on election night, and I swear we're not going to talk too much about the election, but on election night, I was expecting a party in the street in San Francisco. Obviously, that didn't happen. All the Democrats were like sulkily inside, like crying or being upset or whatever, except for one guy went out on the street and screamed like, "God damn it, Nate Silver!
He's like
Use your power for good."
on his knees looking to the sky, Nate Silver!
Yeah, exactly. So.
Which, by the way, is how I express myself about Westworld theories these days. I just get on my knees on the street and go, Joanna Robinson! Whenever one of her theories is proven correct. So, anyway, let's get to the episode. Let's save the Bernard conversation for last, because I have a feeling we're going to have a lot to say about it. But let's start with what's going on this episode with Maeve, right? I think this is one of the most self-contained storylines. Maeve and William Dolores are pretty self-contained this week. So we see Maeve. She's in the Mariposa this week, and the player piano shuts down. Everyone freezes, and they come. The techs come, and they grab Clementine out from under her. Maeve gets herself killed again, and somehow convinces Felix to smuggle her upstairs so that she can see what's going on with Clementine. And then Maeve later on resolves to get the hell out of this whole situation. We should also point out that Clementine is used in a unconvincing demonstration of how reveries are causing the hosts to go all out of whack and kill potentially other hosts or people. So, any thoughts on this Maeve storyline this week? It felt a little bit rickety to me. What do you think?
I don't know if it felt rickety. It felt like, they had a very small sliver of the episode to devote to her, since there was a lot of other things to do, and she got the lion's share of some previous episodes. Tandy Newton, I just want to express again how much silent, powerful face acting Tandy Newton is doing this season. The actress who plays Maeve, both in the Mariposa scene when she has to pretend to be frozen. And so you just see her register like fear and confusion and anger all just on a frozen, semi-frozen face. And then also when she's watching Clementine and she has to, or Clementine, sorry, and she has to, pretend that she's a host and not feeling the feelings that she's feeling. I will say, we talked a lot about the plausibilities of Maeve's plotline last season or last week in terms of blackmailing Felix and Sylvester. We have a lot of people disagree with our concerns. That's fine. But you have to admit that in this episode, she and Felix are just straight up standing outside that demo room, staring. Bernard comes up and just walks right past them, and it's not like they're a door he's not supposed to see. Like, they're just standing right there, and he's just like, "Oh, that's fine. I'm gonna go in and talk to Teresa now." So like, it's just, I will say, it's not their blackest of ops. And if they have like a suicide mission coming up for her to get out of the park, they need to be smarter about it.
So I think there are just a few logical inconsistencies to me. Like the kind that you describe of her just standing there completely not knowing what's going, with no one paying her any mind. Firstly, we've already seen in Westworld there's cameras everywhere, right? So everyone's behavior is being monitored. Even the slightest deviation it gives people room for or reason for devoting some attention to it. So the idea that when all the hosts are frozen and Maeve's still moving around and conscious during that time, that no one would have noticed that feels pretty silly to me, given that we've seen the cameras. What you describe is also a concern. The fact that Maeve understands the significance of Clementine getting drilled through the nose, that's the show's way of saying, hey, we're decommissioning this host, but does Maeve know that? Why would Maeve know that?
Well, her bulk apception is bumped all the way up.
You're right. So she could have just deduced that, hey, they're decommissioning Clementine because of his nose drill, right?
I mean, I don't know if she heard that crunching sound from out in the hallway, but I don't know. I think it's a little clear. Or she could have asked Felix off camera to explain exactly what they did to her. But whatever it wasn't good, right? So
yeah. And then she tells Sylvester and Felix that she has a plan to break out. Sylvester is not super convinced that it's going to be successful, but Maeve has already died hundreds, if not thousands of times. So she's cool with it. Any other thoughts on the Maeve storyline before we move on, Joanna?
Two things. One, Sylvester, I believe it's Sylvester, says this thing where he says, even the skin on your back is created to keep you here. So I don't know what security protocols are in place to keep a host on the property. Like if they're triggered to self-destruct or something, like who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows like what protocol is within them to keep them there. And then the other thing is, I don't remember. Oh, yeah. A big question for me now that we're 3 episodes from the end of the season 1, and we should say season 2 got picked up today. Casey Bloys from HBO announced that it probably won't air until 2018. So see you guys in 2018. We're
That's
all
quite a
still
wait.
here.
Yeah.
Because of the time it takes to produce Westworld. But I've been wondering sort of what season 2 will look like. And, a theory that I posited this week, and I don't know if it's true, this is not a theory I'm throwing a lot of weight behind, is what if Maeve does escape with other hosts and next season we see hosts in the real world trying to pass, doing something like that might be interesting. Spoilers for the film Ex Machina, but, basically continuing on the end of Ex Machina, where Alicia Vikander's AI escapes, presumably to go to try to pass in the real world as a human, right?
Right.
So are we going to see the characters that we know do that next season? I feel like the park plot is going to have to be significantly expanded next year. So that's just a question I have.
Yeah, and Maeve's storyline does bear a lot of similarities to Ex Machina,
right,
from my perspective. So yeah, it is. Who knows what could happen in terms of robots escaping? I will say, when I go to my local Japanese grocery store, that there is a method that they have of locking the wheels on shopping carts to prevent them from leaving the parking lot, so people can't just run off with them.
Yeah.
That is a shopping mall. That is a grocery store. That's not like a multi-billion-dollar company. So I would imagine that they have ways of preventing hosts, all this incredibly expensive R&D technology, from just waltzing off. But we will see how they execute that. I agree, it's probably not going to be super simple. And if it is super simple, then we will complain about it here on the podcast. So what else happens this episode? A few other developments in the William and Dolores storyline. The overriding sense I got when watching this episode, season 1, episode 7, Joanna, is if an episode was custom designed to prove Joanna's theories correct, like if I wanted to make an episode where all the one of the hugest purposes of that episode was to prove Joanna correct in her theories, I don't know that I would have made it any different than this episode. Meaning the William and Dolores interaction, where William is talking about all the things that he wants to do, all the things that Dolores has unlocked inside him, it all makes it seem like he is the Man in Black, that he will become the Man in Black. What did you think?
Yeah, Dave asked me earlier today, or maybe last night, if I thought this episode confirmed that William becomes the Man in Black, and I wouldn't go so far as to say confirm. I feel like I'm like the Nate Silver of predicting things on Westworld. I'm not going to throw all of my percentage points behind this, but I think every episode it becomes
so AKA you are wrong when it counts. Like, what does that mean when you say you're the Nate Silver?
AKA you'll be cursing me in a bad way in the streets at the end of the season. No, I like to be cautious about which. So I can't go. I can't go in. Yeah. I can't go in deep on every theory, or you guys will never believe me. So I just have to pick my battles. But I mean, I definitely think William and the Man in Black are the same person. I don't think this episode confirmed it. The same way I don't think the Lawrence thing confirmed it. I just think it's further data points that get us closer to it. I think it just I feel, we said this already with the Lawrence thing, but I feel, I guess the Lawrence thing where, the Lawrence character disappears the Man in Black story and then shows up in William and Dolores' story. And you and I agree that we felt that meant that the burden of proof that there weren't 2 timelines was now on the doubters, not the hopefuls. And I feel the same way about the William and Man in Black. The more we hear from William about what the park has done to him, or the more that what Lauren says in this episode to William about, I guess you got a more of a knack for this than you thought, or like, you're a natural born killer. I can't remember if he said natural born killer, but it's basically that. Like, all of that feels like the show telling us, like, hey, this guy, his hat is turning from white to black in front of your eyes. Can't you see it? That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, there are two big pieces of dialogue in the train scene that really convinced me that William is a man in black. Number one, he says, quote, "The only thing I had when I was a kid were books. I used to live in them. I used to go to sleep dreaming I'd wake up inside of one of them because they had meaning. This place, this is like I woke up inside one of those stories. I guess I just want to find out what it means," end quote. That dialogue could have been the Man in Black. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just that close. So feels like they have similar goals at the very least. Another quote, quote, "You remember the look on Logan's face when you left him behind? Do you know how long I've wanted to do that to let him know what I think of him? And you, last night, I've never felt that way before, not with any woman," end quote. Just this idea that the park is awakening things inside him that he's never felt before, and that he doesn't want to leave. You can understand why someone like that wouldn't want to leave, which is a sentiment that the Man in Black has expressed. So.
I feel so bad for William that, like, he has sex with a robot and he's like, of course it's going to be the best sex of your life. She's a robot trained to do this, buddy. I don't know. Like, and the more William falls in love with her, the more, like, I am just, like, preemptively embarrassed for how he's going to be laughed at for falling in love with someone whose, like, memory can be erased.
Let me ask you this question, Joanna. And let me take us on a little tangent here, if I may.
I'm ready.
Which is, I have seen several female writers complain about the lack of women having sex with male sex bots in Westworld, at least the portions of Westworld that we see. Do you feel like there is an inequality there in the depiction of sex with robots? Does it perturb you in any way?
Oh, it doesn't perturb me. I think the inequality is definitely there. And I think, of course, we got Hector sort of tied up in Charlotte's bed this episode. But that's sort of like the, to use a Game of Thrones metric, the, like, Dario Naharis bare ass, like, compensation, where it's like, we'll give you one for your, 15 women or whatever it is. Yeah, and I mean, the one visitor that we saw enjoying herself happened to be a lesbian, or at least bisexual, and enjoyed herself with a woman. So, yeah, I think that's a fair complaint. We would like to see more women taking advantage of the male sex bots in Westworld. Why not? But we don't have that many female guests in the park.
Yeah,
at all.
Fusion had this story called "So Can You Have Sex with the Dude Robots on Westworld or What?" This was written by Molly Fitzpatrick, and
when did she publish it? Before this week?
This is published in October 25th, 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll link to it in the show notes. But I think there's no how you'd say male brothel in Westworld, just because that wouldn't be a real thing that existed back then, right? So then it's like, what choices do the women have?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you don't have to have sex with, like, a male prostitute. Like, I'm sure Hector would have sex with plenty of female guests. Teddy, too, probably.
Sure.
Like...
but don't a lot of the male hosts just look kind of gross? You know what I mean? They're, like, dirty and filthy.
I don't know what lens you're using to look at Rodrigo Santoro, who plays Hector Escadon.
Well, this is why we have both gender perspectives on the podcast, so you can correct...
There's also the whole, like, orgy in Las Mudas. I would like to think that... Oh, no, Pariah, sorry. In Pariah. And I'd like to think that at least some of those people were female guests enjoying themselves. So, I don't know.
Some people in the chat room are saying, like, WTF, Dave. And I'm just saying, guys, hygiene was not super great in the Frontier, okay? That's all I'm saying. I mean, Clementine's, one of her main lines is commenting on how people have rinds on them.
So true. Yeah.
It's gross. People are gross back then. That's all I'm saying. All right. Anyway, let's move on, Joanna. So, what else happens in this episode? Dolores and William, they get held up by Confederados, and then they send in Slim, right, full of nitroglycerin, to blow them up and then escape on horseback as the Ghost Nation shows up as well.
You know, you brought this up a couple weeks ago when wondering about the rules of Westworld in terms of if the Man in Black wants to blow, you know, himself and Hector out of prison, he needs to get pyrotechnics approved from headquarters. Whereas we don't see anything similar to that necessarily when Lawrence, because he blows up Slim, right? I'm not misremembering that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so there's a pyrotechnic effect, but we don't see a similar, like, okay from behind the scenes.
Right. It is a host-initiated pyrotechnic effect.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And yeah, you're right. That's one difference. The other difference, I think, is 30 years, but...
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that if the William and Lawrence storyline is happening in the past, maybe their safety standards were more lax back then. Right. Maybe the bullets hurt more back then. Maybe Logan can get imprisoned and tortured for 5 days. And that's a legitimate storyline.
Right.
You know, who knows? Some people did point... I do a weekly Periscope where I talk about this just to prep for the podcast. Some people, I think, did mention that he was weeping white stuff, the Slim, when he rode out there on horseback. I'm not sure if that was the kind of milk that they're made out of or if it was just nitroglycerin.
Oh, I thought it was supposed to be the nitro.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense to me. So, anyway, he blows them up. But here's a better question, Joanna Robinson, is so the bullets are intended to not hurt humans, but then the Ghost Station comes in and they're shooting arrows at people?
It's a really good question.
So how
do the arrows work?
How do the arrows work? Right, like can arrows puncture host skin?
Yeah.
How does that work exactly? You know.
It's a good question.
So then, Lawrence and William Dolores, they stumble across the place that she painted. They head on, even though Lawrence warns them that there's danger out here. Anything else you want to say about this storyline before we move on, Joanna?
Well, you talked about escort missions, and I obviously don't have the video game background to talk about this on like a technical level, but what I felt like I saw was Lawrence kind of trying to entice William along on this adventure. Like, they're never going to, I think, well, we have seen them occasionally force a guest on a certain path by like jailing them, jamming their guns and jailing them or whatever. But like, I feel like they weren't going to force William on this path, but the game really wanted William to go with Lawrence. And Lawrence kept going like, come on, buddy, what are you going to do down there? You love killing. We're going to kill things. It's going to be great. I've seen you. You're good at it. You're going to love it. And William's like, yeah, no, I'm good. I've found out what sex is like, so I'm going to stay here. But I just like that because I liked seeing Lawrence sort of subtly try to sell him on this thing that he wasn't going to buy.
I think you're basically describing, you know, like a game design where you try to persuade the player to go in a certain way, and of course there's many things you can do to force the player to go a certain way. Invisible walls being a big one, where for instance a character can try to go in a certain direction and simply be unable to continue in that direction.
Right.
Because of an invisible wall. But it feels like there are very few walls in Westworld. Not only that, the park seems enormous. I think they've been on that train for like a day or two.
They were overnight on that train. How far did they go?
Yeah. So how fast is the train going? Let's say conservatively 20 miles per hour. You know, so it's like 100 miles across, right? Like
maybe it just slows to a crawl when they're sleeping,
right? It's the train. The Westworld is 200 miles across a diameter. You know, that's nuts.
I think I didn't see the interview, but someone was telling me that. Like I need to look up the exact quote. So please forgive me for paraphrasing, but Katie Rich, friend of the podcast, she and I have had a lot of conversations about the whole Mars thing, which, as you know, I'm not enamored of. And I believe she said that Jonathan Nolan gave me an interview where someone was like, where is Westworld? He's like, the West is a really big place. Like, it's in the West. There's a lot of undiscovered, like unpopulated land in the West. Like, I don't know if he definitely said it wasn't on Mars. I don't think it's on Mars. But, you know, I think Westworld is freaking enormous. Yeah. Is what it is.
So people in the chat room are firstly saying trains could go 40 miles per hour, so it's probably even faster than that, what I said. Adam Barnum in the chat room says the train could have been going in circles, perhaps. Matthew Coleman says, Dave, has the Star Trek holodeck teach you nothing? I don't think that applies. Basically, if you're not familiar, in Star Trek The Next Generation, there's this thing called the holodeck where you can recreate entire worlds, and you could theoretically travel miles, but basically what the holodeck does is it kind of builds the world, as you're walking through it. Do you know what I'm saying? But this is clearly a physical location.
Yeah, this is not a holodeck. I just want to take this moment we get a lot of people asking us who maybe don't follow us on Twitter or what have you. Shudder to think who doesn't follow us on Twitter. But if you're listening to this and you don't follow us on Twitter and you're curious how you can listen to the show live, because a lot of people ask us, and I don't think we necessarily ever say on air, you have to follow us on Twitter because we tweet out the link like minutes before we start broadcasting. We usually try to announce during the day a ballpark time period. And that's how you can participate and sort of be in the chat room when we're recording. We can't send the link out in advance because it populates right in the moment. So you just have to watch that spot on Twitter on Monday nights usually. So follow us. Joanna is at Joe Wrote This. I'm at Dave Chensky. That's Dave Chen SKY. And we'll tweet out links about when we broadcast. I should also say, every week, Joanna, we get inundated with tweets saying, when is the podcast going live? And I'm pretty sure that for the last 6 episodes, it has gone live on Monday night or Tuesday morning. I don't think there's any exceptions to that. So there is. You spoiled them because one Monday we recorded one early Monday morning. Remember?
Oh, right.
And so they had it Monday morning. So they're like, "Where's that crack, man? I need it. You gave it to me early once." Yeah.
So it will be up by Tuesday night at the latest every week, but usually Monday nights is when it goes up. So for those who are curious about the scheduling, just know that that's when it's coming out. Not that we don't love your tweets asking us every week when it's coming out, but yes, it comes out Monday night usually, sometimes Tuesdays. Okay, on with the episode. So those two plot lines are fairly self-contained. Let's dive into the Bernard and Charlotte and Teresa stuff this week. This episode opens with Bernard waking up from a dream, and then he's interacting with his son Charlie, who, by the way, I'm pretty sure was designed in production to be as adorable as humanly possible there with his stuffed animal and the bandage on his head, and clearly not doing very well. I think it's possible that we might have witnessed Charlie dying in the opening scene, right? Because something happens, he kind of passes out, and then we don't know what happens afterwards.
Until my latest mystery theory, which I floated by you, but I'm not ready to unveil to the public, I 1,000% believe Charlie died in that scene.
Yeah.
Now I'm not so sure, but we'll find out.
What you mean... Last night you thought he died in that scene, but now you're not so sure because maybe Charlie is still alive somehow?
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay, anyway. So then Bernard is questioning Hector, and we see... This I thought was super cool because this is a concept that we saw in episode 1 where the hosts are not designed to recognize certain things. So you actually see Hector's dialogue on a screen, and anything that doesn't come from Westworld is kind of grayed out so that Hector theoretically doesn't understand it. So he's talking about a blacklisted exchange where I think Hector says...
Something about a car,
Yeah, quote, he said he wanted to cut off a piece of me to take home in his carry-on, that he wanted to mount it on the hood of his car for his friends to see. And when you see the screen, car and carry-on are grayed out because there's no way Hector should know what those things mean.
Yeah.
And then Bernard shows him photos of modern-day stuff, and we see that Hector is trained to not recognize those things. He can't see them. Very much like Dolores says, I think in episode 1, when she sees a photo of Times Square, that doesn't look like anything to me. And so we see that come back again multiple times this episode. They really hammer home that idea that the hosts can't see things that they're not meant to. So then we have a scene where Charlotte, the board member representative, calls Teresa up to her room, and Hector's there. So, kind of weird, Bernard was just servicing Hector, and now Hector is, quote-unquote, servicing Charlotte. So, I guess board member reps can just loan out robots whenever they want. Like, they just get privileges.
It's a perk, I guess.
Yeah. I guess. But then doesn't Hector have storylines in the park that he's supposed to be fulfilling? You know, he's supposed to be advancing along. Is he just? I guess he's just out for the duration, and the storylines are just
maybe Armistice gets to be like the head of the gang while he's gone or something like that.
Yeah. So then, Charlotte lectures Teresa on how vital the IP in the park is.
Wait, someone just asked me, Chiswick Offsmith, what a classy name, in the chat room, just asked, like, why Charlotte was naked when she answered the door. And this is something actually I got into on Twitter today. I feel very strongly that the scene, like sort of seemed off to a lot of people. I know you and Devindra on your Periscope chat talked about how you weren't sure if Tessa Thompson was like quite right for this role. Maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
yeah, no, that's right. That's right. I felt as though Tessa Thompson, who by the way is an insanely talented actor,
such a good actress,
really,
yeah,
really
a
big
agree.
fan of her. But I felt like she is very miscast because this is a scene where someone's basically doing a total power move, showing someone your genital. If you show someone your genitals and you expect no repercussions, that is a power move, you know?
And that's what I was going to say. So I feel like so this is a power move, and this is something that like I feel like would seem more normal to us if it were an older white dude or a white dude of any kind, like answering the door naked, having just like boned a sex bot, and then like wolfs down. She like sits down. The moment I felt like they were trying so hard to flip gender roles is she sits down on the couch. Her knees are like wide apart as she's just like chowing down on food, and you just like never see a business lady do that in a film or television. And I was like, okay, they're going for like a pig businessman sort of role, but they've got, you know, the beautiful, elegant Tessa Thompson here. And the other thing I will say, like, I don't know if I agree with you or not, if she's miscast or if both of us are sort of chafing against seeing someone we don't expect in a role.
Well,
Do you know?
I think this scene would have been a lot better if the roles were reversed. You know, that it's an older woman, like putting aside the race, like if it's an older woman who's kind of showing her power off, like answering the door, glistening with sex bot fluids on her.
Yeah.
If you know she answers the door and then and like Tessa Thompson is the younger person who's trying to impress them, because Tessa Thompson is 33 years old, and it is very difficult to be on a board or a board member representative if you're 33 years old.
Yeah, I will agree with you that she seems young to be on the board. I will agree with that, and we'll probably talk about that more in the future. But I think that you have worked in the tech world. I live near Silicon Valley. I feel like we see all the time these like young brash assholes just power like alphaing older people who work below them.
Right. It's true.
I think we see this all the time. And so I think that's what they're going for. Whether or not they like stuck the landing, I don't know. I really admire that they do that they cast this young non-white woman in this role. I think it's pretty cool. And as a Veronica Mars fan, this is the modern role that's closest to what Tessa Thompson did on Veronica Mars season 2. So I'm getting some welcome flashbacks to that. But I think that's what they're going for.
Yeah.
A lot of people I think were like weirded out by the scene, but I think that's what they were going.
I think you're right. And maybe it just didn't work for me, and I don't know if that says anything about my perception of the world. But you're right. Maybe Tessa Thompson's character Charlotte founded future Snapchat, you know, and that's why she's on the board,
right?
Or she's a board representative. She's incredibly accomplished and can just order people around. But yeah, I think you're right that's what they're going for, this kind of gender role reversal. And maybe it worked for some people. It didn't quite work for me because it just felt a little bit on the edge of too implausible for me. But we'll probably get a lot of emails to decodingwestworld@gmail.com saying, hey, this happens at my office all the time. So that's cool.
The other thing I want to say, like while we're on the subject of, me being, I don't know, too liberal or whatever, a lot of people have been wondering this week if Charlotte is a host because Ford later says sort of the exact phrase that she said to Teresa about a blood sacrifice. But the creators said in an Entertainment Weekly interview that it's actually like Hector on the bed was recording Teresa, though viewers would have no way of knowing this. Hector was recording the conversation. That's how Ford knew what she said. Like he's the spy there, not Charlotte. I don't want Charlotte to be a host for a number of narrative reasons, but one of them, really truly one of them, is the fact that two of our three main African-American characters on this show are hosts now who are like subject to Ford's whims. I don't want all three to be. So I just don't think that's a great look, personally.
But you do point out something that is quite dumb in this episode, which is that they have this incredibly confidential conversation in the presence of a host who we've already seen are capable of recording everything they see and do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So why would you do, I mean, I've started taping my webcam when I'm not using it. You know, you have a freaking host who can record at the highest fidelity everything that's going on while you're talking about plans to overthrow leadership in the park. That's just dumb.
It's so dumb. We got a lecture. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people in the wake of this election have gotten lectures about like working meals being hacked, higher security. I also have things covering all the cameras on all my devices. Like, it's just, yeah, I agree with you. It's a dumb move.
Dumb move. So, okay. We already know from last week's episode that Teresa has been exfiltrating a bunch of data, right? That Bernard found out, hey, Teresa's exfiltrating all this data from Elsie. And then I think your interpretation of this scene was Charlotte is just telling Teresa, hey, things are going badly. We need to put a stop to Ford even sooner than we thought we would, and figure out a way to back up all this data before. I thought it was a little bit confusing just because the way it was presented last week made it seem like maybe Teresa wasn't the one behind all the data, like maybe she was being framed. And so it felt like a bunch of plot jumps in a very quick amount of time that Teresa has been responsible for all this, when it feels like in this scene she's just being told for the first time. But in your opinion, it all reads fine. Teresa's been with Charlotte this whole time, right?
I think what I said to you is that, and once again, it goes back to the sort of Silicon Valley thing. I think most people can relate to being chewed up by a boss and being told things they already know because they like fucked up something, and then they get the lecture again about why something is important. And you're like, yeah, I know. I just like fucked up this one thing. I'm so sorry. It doesn't mean I forgot the whole reason why we're doing this. On the other hand, I did agree with you that it felt like a lot of exposition, like sort of my complaint about what Logan had to say earlier in the season. And so I feel like she's almost like Bond villain monologuing or whatever, so that we can like get the whole plot and understand it completely here in the audience. It doesn't seem completely organic to have her tell someone who's been in cahoots with her this whole time, here's why we're doing this. But that's my hand wavy explanation, is like, just like someone would be an asshole boss and answer the door naked and make you so uncomfortable. They would also just sort of like dress you down by making you repeat again something you already know about why this is important.
Right. I think that is a pretty charitable interpretation. I think so. To clarify, right? Joanna is just saying that I think that Teresa's dialogue makes sense in this, or I should say, Charlotte's dialogue makes sense in the sense of why would Charlotte be telling Teresa all this stuff that Teresa theoretically already knows? It's because in workplace dynamics, bosses often do that anyway, right?
Yeah.
Whereas for me, it read as though maybe she's telling Teresa for the first time, in which case, or it felt like she was telling Teresa for the first time, even though based on what we learned last episode or the episode before, with Teresa already getting all this data out of the park, that doesn't make any sense. So your explanation probably makes the most sense in this case. So I defer to you once more. But I don't know if you can tell, this whole scene just didn't work for me, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I hear you.
All right. So what else happens in this episode? Basically, in the first of two times, Charlotte tells Teresa that there's going to be a blood sacrifice required in order to dethrone Ford. Right. So they have this demo where they have this tech who hurts Clementine in a really brutal fashion, and then they restart the program, and then Clementine, surprise, surprise, murders Asian tech, who we find out is a host. Right. I thought this scene was great.
Yeah.
Very thrilling and done with just a couple actors in a glass room, and you see how it plays out. You see them freeze and the special effects. Everything about it looks great. I think my one thing that I'm not super happy with the scene is that later Bernard says to Teresa, I could have spotted all the problems with, I spotted all the problems with human intervention in the code. I can't imagine what Ford must think, etc. I wish we had been able to also make that call somehow, but for us, the viewer, we have no idea what Bernard is talking about, right? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But that didn't bother you, I assume.
No.
But great scene. I love the fact that they conceal that the Asian dude is a tech. When they tell him to freeze, you find out that he's a tech. That's just an awesome reversal. So after this, Bernard confronts Teresa, as I already mentioned, and whisks her away to this corner of the park. And what is the reason why he's taking her there again, by the way, Joanna? Do you remember?
Well, he says Ford's got something weird going on here, like unregistered bots. You got to see it. But we find out later that Ford made him say that to take her there.
Yeah. So they go into this room, and then Bernard says, re-explains that hosts are not meant to see, or hosts don't see what they're not meant to see, before he asks the question, what door, which is the second major door-related reveal that HBO's had this year. And at that moment, I think everyone realizes that Bernard is a host, right? What did you think of how they did that reveal? I was talking with Devindra, my colleague, last night, and he said that was a rather ineffective way to make the reveal. Like, you could, when you say what door, that gives the whole game away. Why not save it for later? Because she has that scene later where she realizes it. Why would you give the whole ball game away that early? What do you think of that?
I loved it. I loved it. I thought it was perfect. Like, it's a weird horror movie trope that they're in this creaky old house. They've got a lantern, for fuck's sake. And then the camera just if you watch it again, if you haven't watched it multiple times already, the door is not there when he walks in. And then the camera swings away onto him, and then it swings back. And it all looks like one shot to me. It might have been digitally, whatever. But I kind of feel like they rolled one wall of the set away and rolled another one back in, and it had a door, because when they swung it back, the door was there. And I don't know. I thought it was a really, really thrilling moment. Not just because I'm right, but
well, I think here's the thing. A lot of people were predicting that Bernard would be a host, but Joanna, it's not that you were right; it's the way you were right. Which is that you, for weeks, have been saying, "Hey, the fact that the hosts can't see things they're not meant to see is going to become a huge factor." You have been predicting that, so it's not just that you were right; it's that the way you were right was also correct. Right? That Bernard couldn't see what was happening, and that might explain other aspects, like your prediction. Another one of your theories is that Bernard is Arnold, and that when Ford showed him the photo of himself and Arnold earlier, maybe Bernard himself was in that photo and he just couldn't see it, right? And so now with this episode, it really tees up that possibility even more.
Yeah. Well, I think, someone in the chat room, Third Illusion, says the door was for us, the Bernard diagram was for her. And I really like that. We're all sort of processing whether or not you predicted it. And the feedback that I've heard from viewers and listeners is that, even though so many people predicted that Bernard was a robot, or a host, if you want to, that it was still a really satisfying reveal. And so I think you're kind of processing the door thing and sort of dealing with the fact that Bernard's a host, and then really not that long after, Teresa has to process it, and then Ford is there basically twirling his mustache, and then there's a murder. It's just, I thought it was excellently paced.
I agree. I agree with you completely, and I think that one of the reasons it works so well is because this was not just a cheap reveal for reveal's sake.
Right.
It wasn't as though Bernard just accidentally stumbled upon these documents that then reveal that he's a host. They used the reveal to tell you more about the characters, specifically Ford. You understand the depth of his megalomania and his evil, right, through this scene. And that's what's great about the show is it wasn't just, hey, here's a reveal, Bernard's host. It's, hey, here's a reveal, Bernard's host. Now watch him be used by Ford to murder someone, and now you know more about Ford. And that's what I think is great about this episode. And I agree with you. I thought the what door is a heartbreaking and troubling, scene and a quote that will live in infamy, I think. Right? I've been seeing what door quoted a lot.
Yeah, what door, and it doesn't look like anything to me. Both quoted a lot today.
Yeah.
Scott Weber also in the chat room says, I thought it was great the way it was all revealed. He's like, I thought it was great because it didn't phase her at all, didn't phase Teresa at all. It was a classic Hitchcock thing where we see the bomb, but the people on screen don't. And you and I had this conversation really recently. I can't remember if we were talking about Better Call Saul or what, where we were talking about suspense versus surprise. So you get the suspense of, Bernard's a robot and she's going down into a basement, and he's not only a robot, he's a robot likely controlled by Ford, and then Ford shows, it's like that suspense is there, building and mounting. I really think it was expertly done. So.
I agree, and also the reveal makes a lot of sense now that you know the dynamics at play in the park, meaning it makes sense that Ford would have a Bernard in the park watching things and making sure everything's going okay, because then he can keep track of who's trying to take him down. Right? Yeah. So it's not just, hey, he just happens to have deployed all these bots everywhere. He has actual reason for doing so. I want to say, and I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher her name, but Sidse Babbitt Knudsen, right?
That's pretty good.
Who plays Teresa. She should win an Emmy for this episode.
She's so good.
Because think of everything that this character has to go through this episode, right? If you watch her during that last scene, first she's looking through the papers. She's realizing that this person that she's had intimate relations with is a robot. She thought it was a person. She had sex with him multiple times. He's a robot. Then Ford comes in. She's taking it all in. She's very defiant at first. And then when she realizes what Ford is going to do to her, she then tries to get herself out of the situation. And then realizes that she's about to die. And so fear takes over. And then tragedy when her former lover, she gets murdered by her former robot lover. And there's just a whole host, no pun intended, a myriad of emotions that she has to go through in 5 minutes. And she sells it all, in my opinion.
A couple of things. First of all, I would really like to name a band Former Robot Lover. Secondly, there's this, rewatching. I think I watched this episode probably 30 times.
Yeah, me too.
There's a scene a third of the way through, or it's after she fires Bernard, right before he lures her to the cabin. And he's not mad that she's fired him. And he asks her if she's okay. And she's all tense, and she looks at him, and she just gives him this smile because, it seems so genuine. He's like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, thanks, I'm fine." And
personal questions are an ingratiating scheme.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just heartbreaking because this woman has her walls up. She's so tense. She's so freaked out. She had to go have a conversation with her naked boss. This is not her day. And this guy who she used to have this relationship with, who she had to fire. Set up and frame and fire, asks her if she's okay. And she's like, yeah, I am. Thanks for asking. And then, an hour later, whatever, he murders her. So, yeah, this is a great episode of television, man. Really good.
Really excellent. A lot of people were saying how Ford, played by Anthony Hopkins, is going full Hannibal Lecter in that last scene. Totally agree. Zero remorse on his face. He's just doing what he feels need to be done. And then it is chilling. His performance is chilling this episode. A few other things I just want to point out about this last scene. Firstly, I really like the visual symmetry or juxtaposition with Teresa's body at the end lying there on the ground. It ends on a shot of her, one of her limbs in the shadow it casts. And this show has done a lot to play around with imagery of deactivated host or host in diagnostic mode who look otherwise like dead humans, and then to see a human become a corpse before your eyes really kind of sets up well the the visual connection between a dead human and just a deactivated host, that there's not that much separating them. You know what I mean? In terms of, like, the difference between human and host is not that big. And I think visually, this last shot tries to tell that story. Also, some people have speculated that, the way it's done, the way the murder is shot, you see in the foreground the fabrication machine making a host,
right.
And then you see Teresa getting murdered in the background. Some people have speculated maybe Ford is creating a host version of Teresa in the back, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that is true, but I think what is clear is that now that this scene has occurred and we know that Ford is that insane, any character in the park could be a host now, right?
And I mean, honestly, that's so... a lot of the stuff that I feel like I've tried to figure out from the show has come from like this groupthink theorizing. Like I said in previous episodes, I never would have thought of the 30-year time difference or William becoming the Man in Black when I watched those first 4 episodes by myself. But when I watched them, that first episode where they tried to sell you Teddy as a guest and then he turned out to be a host, I was like, okay. What we have to then suspect is that any human could be a host, because they're not going to do that if they're not going to do it to you again. That was my thinking. So then I started to look for who might be a host, and just like everyone else in the world, like I kind of settled on Jeffrey Wright. Not because his performance is robotic, because it's not at all. He's very warm and lovely. And in fact, Jeffrey Wright said in a couple interviews last night that he did not know his character was a host until after he shot the pilot. They didn't tell him until after episode 1 because they wanted his performance to not be robotic. And a lot of members of the cast didn't know until they got the script for episode 7 that he was a host. So, we had talked about this in the podcast before in terms of after you interviewed Vincenzo Natali, who directed episode 4, was it?
Yep.
3? About how much the creators are keeping their players in the dark, directors and cast members and stuff like that, about the big reveals and whether that's effective and whether that's not. And like we argued that maybe it wasn't with the director, but I don't know, maybe it was with Jeffrey Wright. They sort of tricked him into creating as lifelike a character as possible, and then they were just like, cool, keep going with that, So, that's interesting to me. I'm so sorry. I feel like I've wandered off path. But I do want to say that I agree with you that anyone could be a host. In fact, a lot of people now suspect that like everyone who works at Delos is a host. And like Teresa was the only human, because Ford says something like, sometimes they send someone like you to test me. And so some people are thinking that everyone's a host. I don't know that I don't know that I want to believe that Elsie is a host. I could buy Stubbs being a host. But I can't buy Elsie being a host. Not yet. We'll see.
Worth noting is we don't see any of Elsie this episode, and we do see Stubbs. So,
we do see Stubbs.
So it kind of it implies that Stubbs is not the person that grabbed Elsie in that episode.
I don't know. I still think he has her stash somewhere.
He has her stash in some bunker somewhere.
Yes.
Maybe. Yeah.
A bunker where there's no cell phone reception, so you can't figure out where she is. But yeah, we should mention that there was this whole like dicey like Elsie's on vacation or like whatever plotline this week. But yeah, so to reverse to what you originally said before I rambled off topic, which is I want that to be a host version of Teresa on the printer, only because I love Sidsa Babbitt-Newton so much and I don't want her to leave the show. So I would love for her to come back as a host. It also sort of is the cleanest way to cover a murder, right? And then you would have a mole. There might be some indications that is not the case, but we'll see. And if you are missing her, if she does not return to the show, and you are missing her, I cannot recommend the series Borgen highly enough, which is a Swedish political drama where she is the prime minister, and she's fantastic in it. So
I think this episode does leave open a few questions. For instance, does this then mean that Ford murdered Arnold versus Arnold killed himself, right? If Ford is capable of murdering people and replacing them with hosts, did Ford murder Arnold? He has that evil in him. Could he have done that? I don't think we have any indication either way, but it just shows now he's capable of that. Right?
I think it certainly could have. He's definitely even more of an unreliable narrator than we already thought he was. So any story that he told about Arnold, we're not sure we can believe. I will say, my theory that when we finally see Arnold, he's going to look like Jeffrey Wright and that we've already seen flashbacks to Arnold, played by Jeffrey Wright in the show. I think is slightly reinforced in this scene because we see the schematics for the Dolores robot. We see Dolores' name at the bottom.
Yeah.
But when we see the schematics for Bernard, we don't see, it's cut off. You don't see the name at the bottom. So I want to say it says Arnold on the bottom of that piece of paper, but, you know, who knows? We'll see.
I thought we did see his name, but maybe I just invented it in my head. Yeah, Very possible.
You saw the door where there wasn't a door. But the other thing I want to say is, like, if, you know, to roll on now to this next theory, right? Like, if Bernard is a facsimile of Arnold that Ford has created, it is so insidious because it's obvious that these two creative partners clashed in their idea of what the park should be. And it's obvious that that Arnold was working in opposition to Ford about what the park should be. I mean, it seems like Arnold was trying to destroy the park, and Ford, who wants to be the god of his little universe, like nothing was more important than protecting his universe. So yeah, that gives him motivation to kill Arnold, I think. Yeah. So it's possible that he did. But even creepier than that is if he killed Arnold and then made a robot version of him who would be forever compliant, forever loyal. He has the line where he says, they're free here under my control. That's what he says about the robots. And it's just like, and then it cuts to Bernard looking baffled and upset. And it's so chilling. We have to give, as you already did, Anthony Hopkins credit for his performance in that scene. And Jeffrey Wright. I mean, you couldn't have picked three finer players for this really, really fantastic scene.
It was really well done. Yeah, agreed completely. Another question that this episode raises is also when Bernard is talking to his wife in a video call earlier, what's going on there, Joanna? What do you think? I think your theorizing still states that what we're seeing of Bernard scenes could also be Arnold scenes, right?
Right.
That Bernard and Arnold are the same person, and that when we see a scene with Bernard interacting with his wife, for instance, that could just be a flashback to Arnold interacting with his wife, right? Like his real-life wife. And when we see a flashback to Bernard and his child dying, that could be Arnold and his child dying, and that maybe Bernard has similar memories of a child dying as well.
Right.
What we know about Arnold is that Ford, the unreliable narrator, said that Arnold's life was marked by personal tragedy, which to me sounded like the death of a child, but that's definitely extrapolating from a vaguer sentence. The only one error, I'll have to go double check, but someone in the chat room earlier tonight was saying that there's a Delos logo when in that scene with Gina Torres on the Skype or whatever, that there's a Delos logo on
Skype,
the thing. Yeah. I'll have to go double check that because I haven't watched to look for that. But if our theory is that Delos didn't come along until later in the park, I don't know if that's an inconsistency, if that blows my entire theory out the water. I don't know. I'll have to go check.
Well, it could just be a hologram of Gina Torres. You know, I did comment at the time that scene felt pretty, that the delivery and the dialogue felt pretty wooden in that scene. So it could just be a loop that Bernard needs to go on, for instance.
Yeah.
Right?
It could be. Yeah, absolutely. It could be a loop that he's on to sort of reinforce his humanity. All these memories that he has of Charlie in the hospital are either sort of implanted backstory or downloaded from Arnold's own experience. We will have to stay tuned to find out. But I feel like so certain that we're going to see a third figure in that photo, and that figure is going to be in that Arnold photo, and that figure is going to be Jeffrey Wright. So,
I mean, I think that the show has already been playing with perspective in the sense that we've already kind of seen things from Bernard's perspective. Example, last week when Anthony Hopkins shows up out of nowhere.
Right.
It's like we saw that scene from Bernard's perspective. So, given that we've already the show has opened the door on that already, and I think it's very possible that you could be right there. Also, I don't think I can ever win any money betting against you ever again. And we should be clear here. Again, it's not just that Joanna got the Bernard is a host thing right, because a lot of people were guessing that. It's the way that she got it right, and it's that it hinges on Bernard not being able to see certain things, and I just was so ashamed, after that I had doubted you at all. I was like all the election pundits this week who doubted that Trump could win. I felt like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I doubted that Joanna could get this right.
Oh God, does that make you like Kellyanne Conway or something like that?
Yeah,
terrible.
Yeah, that's right.
That's awful. Okay.
But yeah, I don't doubt any of your theories anymore. Or no, that's not even true. I doubt plenty of your theories, but I doubt them slower now.
Okay.
So there you go.
I'll just say, like I said before, I promise I don't. I have been burned before. I burned this year on a Game of Thrones theory I felt really, really sure about. So I've been wrong. I'm a little more hesitant these days to sort of really go down, and when we first started talking about the multiple timeline theory at the start of the season, I was not sure about it. So I think I was like a little hesitant about it, and then I got on board with it. So
I think we're now certain that the multiple timeline theory is correct. Right. You and I are fairly confident.
I feel pretty certain. Yeah, I do.
And to compare your confidence level between that and Bernard being Arnold, what do you think?
Okay, so if you put my like multiple timeline or time period, sorry, timeline haters. If you put that at like 95%, then I would put my Bernard as Arnold thing at like 75 or 80%. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, thereabouts. Oh, the other thing I want to say is we got a lot of questions, and we actually talked about it on air, about the way that Jeffrey Wright wears his glasses. An intrepid reporter at Vulture asked Jeffrey Wright about his glasses, and he gave the answer that a lot of our listeners gave, which is like, dude, if you're older, that's how you wear readers. That's how you wear reading glasses, down on your nose.
All right, well, I'm glad we aren't the only people bothered by it. So
Jeffrey Wright was like, if you're asking that question, you must be young, because that's how old people wear glasses. So yeah.
Let's talk about the title of the episode, Trompe l'oeil, which is my best attempt at reproducing it. Trompe l'oeil is an art technique that uses realistic imagery to create the optical illusion that the depicted objects exist in 3 dimensions. And then we had a listener write in. Chris writes in that from the Wikipedia page in the history and painting section, quote, a version of an oft-told ancient Greek story concerns a contest between 2 renowned painters. Zeuxis, born around 464 BC, produced a still-life painting so convincing that birds flew down to peck at the painted grapes. A rival, Parrhasius, asked Zeuxis to judge one of his paintings that was behind a pair of tattered curtains in his study. Parrhasius asked Zeuxis to pull back the curtains, but when Zeuxis tried, he could not, as the curtains were included in Parrhasius' painting, making Parrhasius the winner. End quote. So then Chris goes on to say, I believe a version of this happened tonight with the Bernard reveal in the sense that Teresa and Charlotte thought they were providing a convincing reality, proving the dangers of the park and thereby emasculating the great Ford, but Ford proved his convincing reality was the greater achievement, showing that he knew every single aspect of the park to a degree they weren't even prepared for. End quote. So I thought that was a great explanation of what the title might mean. Do you feel like that's pretty accurate? I think that Trompe l'oeil, at a very surface level at least, refers to Bernard being a host, even though we didn't think he was, right?
You're right. Or Trompe l'oeil, we should say, or I don't think the email said that. Literally means like to deceive the eye. L'oeil being eye in French, or les yeux. Anyway, the door appearing and disappearing also, like that's a very Trompe l'oeil moment, I thought, as well. But yeah, like fools the eye. We've been talking about how the episode titles kind of tend to belong to one character or another. The original, the Stray, the Adversary, which I would say is Ford, but whatever, or it could be Charlotte, or could be Teresa, or whoever you want it to be. Then Trompe l'oeil is Bernard, who might be Arnold. Dun dun dun.
Indeed. Also, Ford quotes "What dreams may come" in this episode, which is from Shakespeare, specifically Hamlet, the "To be or not to be" speech, where he says, "Quote, To die, to sleep perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil. Must
You don't
give
think
us
he was
pause.
making reference to the Robin Williams movie? I think he's a secret Robin Williams fan.
Yeah, no, I mean, he could very well be talking about the Robin Williams film, What Dreams May Come. But that was a pretty rough movie. We'll just say that. The 1998 film directed by Vincent Ward. Have you seen that movie, Joanna?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have seen that movie. I actually read the book as well as saw the film because it's based off of I think a Richard Matheson novel. And yeah, the movie is not as good as the book. Just put that out there. Anyway. Any other theories or questions that you feel this episode sets up?
I think the biggest questions we have are what's next for Maeve? What ramifications are there for Ford if Teresa does stay dead? Like with the board, does the board just if he doesn't replace her with a robot, does the board just go, oh, you got us again, Ford. You killed another one of our envoys. Good. Oh, we always just try to be a few steps ahead, but you beat us every time. So yeah, I want to know, and Charlotte says in her scene where she's smoking and cramming crackers in her mouth, she says, I think it's that scene where she says something like, if you think I'm a nightmare, wait till you meet the rest of the board, or before the whole board descends. So I don't know if we're going to see the entire board. Someone I was talking to was comparing them to Evil Core from Mr. Robot, or I would say Wolfram and Hart from Angel. An evil board of suits is coming. Are Maeve and her robot cohorts going to kill them all in the finale? That might be fun. I don't know. It's all speculation at this point. Where do you think William and Dolores are going?
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like another one of those maze-esque MacGuffins. If I had to guess, I would say they're headed towards a revelation regarding the limits of the park. Because they do feel like they're at the outer edges, having traveled 300 miles overnight to get to, that there may be that something's going to happen where they find the edge of the park and there's some kind of revelation about the limits of the park. I'm just totally taking a stab in the dark here. So, but I am very curious how this whole Man in Black William reveal is going to happen, if it does happen, and if it is in fact true. So,
right. And where's Elsie? And why couldn't Bernard have killed Sizemore instead of Teresa?
Good questions. Good questions. All right. Well, I think with that, we are going to wrap it up this week for Decoding Westworld. A lot of excitement ahead. Stay tuned to this space at decodingwestworld.com. You can also email us at decodingwestworld@gmail.com. And when I say a lot of excitement, what I mean is potential exciting Westworld-related guests to appear on the show. I mean potential new podcast projects that Joanna and I are discussing. So,
oh my gosh, so many announcements.
We may have some excitement for you guys ahead. So yeah, stay tuned to this space. And thanks for listening to this week's episode. Joanna, you want to tell people where they can find more of your work on the internet this week?
You can find me at Joe Wrote This on Twitter, still being angry about the election. You can find me VanityFair.com, being less angry about the election. And I'm also going to be talking about Westworld over on Storm of Spoilers this week. That's our rotating topic this week. So if you haven't heard me talk enough about Westworld, tune into Storm of Spoilers, the podcast that I do on Wednesdays.
Find me at Dave Chensky. That's Dave Chen, SKY. Find all my other stuff at davechen.me. Thanks for listening to Decoding Westworld. We'll see you guys next week.